Hello, my name is Eder Gallegos. I'm a historian from Mexico, but I'm a PhD candidate for the University Pablo de Olavide in Seville, in Spain. And now I have this topic, a research about the Royal Artillery Foundry of Manila, technical labor and global circulation inside the panel 10, warfare and military history. Thank you for your kindness. The Spanish defensive technical system of Manila used as a nucleus the few instruments and the experience of individuals who had manipulated weapons in other locations, European or Spanish America. It is necessary to point out that before the arrival of the Castilians, the Spaniards, in Luzon, the region knew the art of cannon making. However, the artillery house of Celudong, Manila, was burned during the siege of Martín de Goiti and Juan de Salcedo. Natives who could offer artisanal expertise were employed. One of two cannon foundries in the ancient Muslim Manila was a Japanese Christian named Pablo. The other founder, who had been in the service of Raja Suleiman, was a native known as Panday Pira, who learned Portuguese-style manufacture decades ago and served in the composition of lantacas until his death in 1576, during the governorship of Francisco de Sande. There have been indications that his sons continued the work mediocrely over the next decade, but in some area outside of Manila, not yet determined exactly. Jose Rizal gives a clue. Probably in Lamayan, Santa Ana, using the passing river to transport the pieces. A testimony of its existence at Costa de los Naturales by the natives is in the report of Diego de Zárate, dated June 6, 1581, located in the Archivo General de Indias in Seville, Spain. Obviously, the production and supply of weapons was insufficient, so that very soon knowledge and technical skills were transferred from the peninsular sphere to the Spanish Oceanic world, although their quality was doubtful. I allow myself to postulate that with the start of the Anglo-Spanish War, the production capacity of longer caliber weapons in the Iberian Peninsula was overloaded, prevented the adequate supply of Philippines. In 1584, Manila only had 50 archaic pieces. Therefore, the arrival of defensive reinforcement was discontinuous. For that reason, from the age of 1580 and at last until 1586, the Robles family, Fabian and Damian, bell foundries in Manila, dedicated themselves as private artisans to the composition of exploded artillery of the naos and to try to compose new weapons receiving quantities of lead, bronze, tin, and iron. However, by June 1587, the Viceroy of New Spain was ordered from Manila to send a new qualified smelter as soon as possible, because the skills of the family Robles did not satisfy the needs. Thus, in 1591, the Royal Artillery Foundry of Manila was officially founded, probably beginning with the sons of Panday Pira and the blacksmith Juan Rodriguez Carrillo. The artillery foundry on the banks of the passing river remained in constant operation for the rest of the 17th century, because at the peak of civilian production and shipment between 1608 and 1634 of 513 bronze pieces, only 103, the 20%, were destined for the naval defense of the Philippines. Still, in 1680, the Casa de Contratación of Seville, Spain, insisted that it did not have the 8 bronze pieces requested for Havana, Campeche, or Manila, because it will take 30 months to manufacture. The financing of the artillery foundry did not necessarily come from the situados of New Spain from the first half of the 17th century. It began to run through local mechanism. At the end of September 1645, in the Real Cédula addressed to the president of the Audiencia of Manila, information was requested on the profits of gambling known as metua, made by the Sanglays during their New Year celebration, with the aim of raising funds to support the Cannon Foundry y que no cueste nada a la Real Hacienda. A clue that this project was carried out comes from another document from Madrid, dated 11 March 1652, addressed to the Philippine governor Sabiniano Manrique de Lara, in which the application of license is renewed to approve the games of the Chinese during their festivals for the fortification of the city of Manila and foundry of artillery, and indicates that this provision had been taken from the times of his predecessor, Diego Fajardo Chacón. Another source of income that probably financed the production of cannons in Manila came from the estanco al bullo. The bullo is a mixture of areca fruit, shell, lime, and betel leaves that Filipino natives frequently chewed as a stimulant. At least since 1645, the Crown requested information on whether it was possible to create said estanco, so that with its profits, the foundry works could be sustained. Unlike the case of the metua, it seems that the proposal did not prosper quickly. Again, on March 11, 1652, Miguel Poblete, Archbishop of Manila, was asked to communicate if it was convenient to create it so that with the total of the incomes could be sponsored the artillery foundry. About the individuals in charge of the manufacture and repair of armaments in the Pacific, who were those men who crossed the ocean to apply this technique? How many of them were blacksmiths or members of the clergy? To name a few, the blacksmith Juan Rodriguez Carrillo arranged cannons during the attack of Limahon in 1574 and declared that he had arranged what was necessary for the subsequent royal foundry. The brothers Robles, between 1580 and 1586, Fernando del Castillo, who at least since 1593 assisted as a blacksmith master in Manila. On the other hand, Fernando de los Rios Coronel, clergyman and cosmographer, who founded 6 pieces in 1598, and Melchor Perez, who in 1648 worked as a master artillery foundry. Still, finding qualified staff to melt cannons was always a problem. In a letter dated May 18, 1697, Fausto Cruzat, governor of Philippines, asked that the problem be solved from the Viceroyalty of New Spain or the Iberian Peninsula. Later on, the same document refers to the explicit order for the foundry master Enrique Bernardo Javet to look for 2 competent foundries in Seville. Furthermore, he mentions that since 1692 in Manila, another foundry had been fired for being inept. These peninsular people who dared to make the world journey to Manila, passing from port to port and contributing their knowledge in each one of them to contribute to the defensive, can be understood as intermediaries of technical and cultural contributions by what their remuneration placed them in the artisans' city of the elite. As the following chart shows, the chart in below, with the salaries of the Foundry workers since 1637, their gratification was well compensated compared to the rest of the local crafts, and above all, the pecuniary benefits also reached the work performed by natives and Sanglays. To this scenario, it should be added that in these border territories, the smelters signified a direct relationship with the Hispanic monarchy and represent an initial point of contact with the Western European world, generating the latter's identification with technical advance in weaponry or military tactics that played a role important. The resultant is that, in addition to remuneration, certain privileges were offered, such as the right to choose their successors. Uh, Rations in kind of cargo on the galleon to Acapulco, providing prestige and advantage job opportunities to these external agents of the Hispanic monarchy. Regarding the materials, iron depends on imports from China or Vizcaya in Spain, in addition to Bengal and Siam. To be sure, the majority depend on the production of Chinese tin and Japanese copper to melt the bronze artillery. Even at some points during the Iberian Union, it is possible that the importation of special metal, such as the so-called kaolin, and the documentation appeared, from Macau or Malacca, was agreed for the Royal Cannon Foundry in Manila. What is certain is the high quality of the pieces made in the Philippines. Remember it even in times of independence of Mexico. Why were they better pieces than those from Seville or Spain? In this regard, in a document dated June 22, 1598, where Fernando de los Ríos Coronel, a priest and Attorney General of the Philippines, writes from Manila to King Philip II about his progress to manufacture cannons with the help of Chinese auxiliaries. Perhaps one of the first occasions in which Sanglays artisans collaborated in the casting of Spanish cannons. And very probably some were the same ones who, after being expelled in 1603, manufactured in Peking, Beijing, Spanish-style cannons called Lu Song Pao for Chinese Emperor Wan Li 12 years later. Do Chinese crafts explain the quality of your guns? Perhaps the answer is the use of Japanese cobre rojo instead of European or Mexican, and the use of the enigmatic tin called kaolin from Macau or Malacca. It is undeniable that the pieces manufactured in Manila were high performance, so it would not surprise see them appear along the Pacific aboard on the Spanish ships to end up in some fortifications. But it is striking that, at least since the last decades of the 17th century, Philip cannons circulated to the Atlantic coast of New Spain, moving them by land and river through the Isthmus of Tehuantepec to the fortification of San Juan de Ulua in Veracruz, current Mexican city. Why transport cannons manufactured in the Pacific to the Atlantic if there was production in Seville, Spain? In 1804, the Prussian traveler Alexander von Humboldt was also fascinated by this fact as it passed to the Gulf of Mexico and dedicated a section to it in his famous book, Ensayo político sobre el reino de la Nueva España. Textually, among the artillery of the castle of San Juan de Ulúa in Veracruz, some melted cannons in Manila were discovered, as it was known that before 1767, the Spaniards to go to the Philippine Islands did not go up the Cape of Good Hope of the Cape of Hornos, and that since the first expedition of Magellan and Loaiza, who had left Spain, the entire Asian trade was carried out by the Acapulco galleon. It was known concept Bible how the Scanions had crossed the continent of Mexico to take them from Manila to Ulua Castle. The great difficulty of the road from Acapulco to Mexico, from there to Jalapa and Veracruz, did not make it very likely that they had come that way. By deed of inquirers, it was learned. But from the Tehuantepec Chronicle, written by Burgoa, and from the tradition that are preserved among the peoples of the Coatzacoalcos Isthmus, that these canyons melted on the island of Luzon and landed on the San Francisco Bar. They had climbed the Santa Teresa Bay and the Chimalapa River, which had transported them to the Malpaso River through the Chivela Hacienda and the Tarifa Forest, and having embarked again, had made them descend by the Coatzacoalcos River to the mouth in the Gulf of Mexico. Additionally, after the revision of the text written in 1664 by Fray Francisco de Burgoa, Geográfica Descripción, it is confirmed that reference is made to the transfer of large pieces of artillery from the Manila through the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, but unfortunately, no further details. More research is needed on technical transfer and its interoceanic circulation from local settings, but with a global perspective. Currently, in the Museum of the Mexican City of Veracruz, exhibit a canyon made in Manila. The mobilization of the extraordinary cannons manufactured in Manila to the Atlantic Ocean continued sporadically until the first decades of the following century. Although the production has been to be subject to the fluctuations of the internal politics and the Spanish monarchy. In 1690, a new expulsion of Chinese was decreed, and with it, a decrease on the production of Royal Artillery Foundry of Manila. But it was not the end. It was the beginning of a new process. Thank you for your kindness.